Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin on Sunday with our great friend, great patriot, Senator Ted Cruz. How are you?
Mark, I'm doing great. Great to be with you.
By the way, how's your re-election effort going? I know you're up. We talk about these presidential races. You've got a tough one in Texas. What's going on there?
We have a very tough fight. I'm running for re-election in 2024, and Chuck Schumer has made clear I'm his #1 target in the country. I remember last time I ran in 2018, they outspent me 3-1. It was the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. They flooded cash into Texas. They more than doubled Democrat turnout in Texas. And I ended up winning by just barely 3 points. 2.6% was the margin last time. And so my likely opponent is a very liberal Democrat congressman, has voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He's hard left. But he's raising money like crazy. He's raising money even faster than Beto O'Rourke did 6 years ago, and that was the most expensive Senate race that had ever happened. And so we're going to face over $100 million coming in against us. And the challenge, look, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you're a left-wing partisan, after Donald Trump, there's nobody in the country you want to beat more than me. And so these guys in New York or Chicago or San Francisco, they go give 50 or $100 to whoever the guy is running against Cruz. And so we got cash coming in like crazy against us, but we're doing the hard work, and so we'll raise the money. My website is tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. So if you want to support the campaign, we need the help because we are working our tail off.
Well, I'll tell you, you've done something very, very important. You have taken the time as a senator to communicate with the American people about what's going on in this country, not only on TV and radio and your own podcast, but in a brand new book. And what's amazing about your book, Ted Cruz, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America, that's the nub of the matter.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. I went through your book. It's absolutely superb, and it's prescient in many ways. And it's this. You see what's happening in our streets, in our colleges and universities, in our media, the Democrat Party. They're all into this.
Yep.
Just to dig a little deeper, as you do in your book, there seems to me to be an overlay between this Marxist ideology and this Islamist ideology.
Absolutely.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think we're seeing it play out in real time with the war in Israel, that we are seeing our institutions, we're seeing the universities, we're seeing journalism, we're seeing government, all acting under capture and control of the hard left, of the radical Marxists. You know, with the book, I sat down to write it because, you know, many of us have had the reaction over recent years, what the hell is going on? I mean, the world has gone crazy, and what we've seen is virtually every major institution in our country has been seized by the radical left. And so I sat down in this book to explain, okay, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And importantly, what do we do to fix it? How do we fight back? And so it starts with universities. And I describe universities as the Wuhan lab of the woke virus. Universities are where it started, where it was created, where it mutated, and where it spread. And sadly, Harvard University, where I went to law school, is ground zero for this. And it started back in the 60s and 70s with just plain Jane vanilla Marxists, people who adhered to Karl Marx. As you know well, Marx viewed the world as economically determined, with an inevitable struggle between the oppressors and the victims. And for him, it was a socioeconomic frame. So the oppressors were the owners of capital, the victims were the proletariat, the workers. And the solution was a violent overthrow by the proletariat to forcibly seize the means of production from the owners of capital and to use government to redistribute it to the victims instead. And what happened, that was initially economic, but at the universities, it then shifted into cultural arenas, and they applied the same lens to race, and we got critical race theory. Same idea, the Marxist battle between oppressors and victims, this time based on race. They believe America's irredeemably racist, and the answer is to use government force and violence to take from the oppressors and give to the victims. They also use the same frame on gender and gender ideology and the extremes they've embraced there. Now, you look at what's happening in Israel. About a week ago, I was sitting down with a very successful tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, who's historically been quite left. And he was really disturbed and frankly confused why universities right now are so obviously, viciously anti-Israel, viciously anti-Semitic, why a significant chunk of the Democrat Party, the squad, the far left, is blatantly anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. And he was asking why, and I said, look, the reason is simple. In their worldview, which is a Marxist worldview, Jews are coded as the oppressors. They're the bad guys. Palestinians are coded as the victims. And their answer is what's happening right now. The violent overthrow, including murder of civilians, including horrible atrocities. But to the Marxist, all of that is justified if you are murdering the people you have deemed to be the oppressors. And we've seen the interconnection. For example, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, as you know, is an explicitly Marxist organization founded by trained Marxist organizers, and they're virulently anti-Israel. They put out, Black Lives Chicago put out a tweet with an image of the paraglider saying, we stand with the Palestinians. Of course, the paraglider, they're the ones that came in and murdered hundreds of teenagers and young people just attending a concert in Israel. And this is all, if you have the hard left Marxist worldview, it explains the 19-year-old idiot at a college campus who's cheering for the death squads and not the women and children who are being slaughtered.
What accounts for, and you cover this thoroughly in the book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And by the way, Amazon.com, any major bookstore, this is the exclusive first interview. The book comes out on Tuesday. Senator Cruz, what do you make of this administration, though? You have Joe Biden, who's now turned on Israel. He's making public statements so their enemies and our enemies can hear that he wants them to appease. A temporary humanitarian ceasefire means they lose. They've surrounded the enemy. They're doing everything they can to avoid civilians. No army on the face of the earth fights the way the Israelis do in terms of their humanitarianism, and yet he lectures them publicly. Isn't this because it's politics? He's worried about his vote in Michigan. He's worried about his vote in Arizona. There's enough of a population of Arabs and Muslims there, and they're turning against him. So he would throw Israel over the cliff in order to get reelected. Am I misreading this?
You know, I don't think it's driven by Dearborn, Michigan. I don't think it's driven by Muslim votes in the Democrat Party. I think it's driven by angry white liberals who hate Israel and who are Marxist and anti-Semites. This administration is captured by the far left. You look at the foreign policy of the Biden administration, it is continuing every mistake of the Obama administration, but even worse. What has Joe Biden done? In a little under 3 years, he's flowed nearly $100 billion into Iran. Iran is the leading state sponsor of terror. Iran is the patron of Hamas, the patron of Hezbollah, provides over 90% of the funding for Hamas. Not only that, the Biden administration has sent hundreds of millions of dollars into Gaza that went straight to Hamas, and is, in a very literal sense, funding the death squads that are murdering Israelis and murdering Americans. And this was not only the worst attack on Israel in 50 years, it's also one of the worst terrorist attacks on America in history. 31 Americans were murdered. Roughly a dozen Americans are hostages still. And the Biden administration's immediate response, all right, so this played out in October 7th. In the early morning hours of October 7th, about 3 in the morning, the Biden State Department, the Office of Palestinian Affairs, sends out a tweet saying, we condemn Hamas's attack, But violence solves nothing, and there should be no retaliatory strikes. No one should strike back. This is literally as monsters are targeting civilians, going house to house, murdering everyone in the house simply because they're Jews. And the U.S. State Department says to Israel, do not retaliate, engage in no military response. What an asinine statement. So at 3 in the morning, my team and I, we saw that. We responded at 3 in the morning and said, this is disgraceful, and everyone who wrote this or signed off on it should be fired. They deleted the tweet within an hour. The next day, Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, sent a tweet. Said he just met with the Turkish foreign minister and they agreed to work together to push for a ceasefire for Israel. That's the next day. Once again, I denounced that tweet. I said, this is ridiculous. The word ceasefire, as you know, is code word. Look, the terrorists aren't ceasing anything. They will cease when they've murdered every Jew. That's their objective, is to kill everyone. When the U.S. State Department says ceasefire, what they are saying to Israel is, don't defend yourself. Don't go and defeat Hamas. Don't kill the terrorists. Just sit there helpless and let them kill innocent civilians. Again, Blinken, the State Department, deleted that tweet when I called him out within the hour. What did Tony Blinken do? Flew to Israel and demanded what he called a humanitarian pause, which I will commend the wordsmiths for coming up with a different word for ceasefire. And the position of the Biden administration seems to be, please stop trying to kill the terrorists. We're rooting for the bad guys, and you guys are too effective at killing them. It is infuriating. And by the way, they combine it with, they still want to send money to these guys. One of the very first things Joe Biden said is we need to send $100 million to Gaza. Gaza is controlled by Hamas. By the way, these leftists on college campuses, they talk about this as occupied territory. Look, Israel isn't in Gaza. Israel doesn't control Gaza. Israel left the Gaza Strip. Said, all right, you want it? It's yours. We're gone. The only thing we're going to do is put up a wall to make sure that lunatics who want to kill us don't come over and kill us. But the Palestinians control the Gaza Strip 100%. It is ruled by Hamas. Now, they live in misery and poverty. Why? Because they're a theocratic death cult that are motivated by one thing, raging hatred for Jews. And so the international community sends hundreds of millions of dollars in there for hospitals, for schools, for water pipes. What do? They take all the money and they use it to wage war. They take the water pipes, they rip them up, and they chop them into rockets to fire rockets at Israel because they'd rather murder Jews than provide water for Palestinian babies. That dynamic, you look at the college campuses where they're protesting, they don't know that. They don't know that. They don't care. And the Biden administration's consistent response is send money to Gaza anyway, even though we know it'll go to terrorists.
Let me circle back with you here. The book is Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. These are the entrails, really, of what's happened as a result of decades of indoctrination, brainwashing, leftism, Islamicism, and on and on. And you talk about this in the book. You go through the whole history of this and what we should do about it. The Squad, you can't accuse them of being white liberals.
Yeah.
They come into this country, some of them are first generation, some of them are second generation. Our border's wide open.
Yep.
People are coming into this country. We don't know who they are, by the millions. They caught some on the terrorist watch list, which means some terrorists got through. They caught some, but they're not going to catch them all.
Right.
That system's not perfect. You have a president of the United States that is arming the enemy, Iran. President of the United States that's telling Israel to stand down, even though they're fighting the enemy for us and them. You have a president of the United States that has the border wide open with drug cartels and coming in. And so my question to you is this, for after the break. Joe Biden and Blinken keep talking about their concern for the citizenry. Do they show any concern for the 100,000 people dying every year from fentanyl in the United States, the American citizenry? Do they show any concern about the citizenry in Iran that rose up to try and overthrow that regime? And then all of a sudden the spigots turn back on when Trump leaves and they've put them down and they're slaughtering their own people? They keep talking about their concern for the citizenry. Isn't that kind of what you're saying here? They twist the language, they use the language to promote an agenda which is in fact inhumane. I want your point on this as soon as we return. Welcome back, America. We're talking with Senator Ted Cruz, his brand new fantastic book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. Very prescient. Covers all really that's going on in this country today. So my question is, does this administration actually demonstrate in its own actions, even in our own country, concern about citizens?
The exact opposite. They're interested in power and ideology, and that's consistent with cultural Marxism. Is about using culture to enforce through force and power their orthodoxy. When it comes to, you asked about the border. What is happening at the southern border is a catastrophe that has no precedent in the history of our nation. I was down at the southern border. I went out on midnight patrol with the Border Patrol agents. As always, within about an hour, you encounter illegal immigrants. It takes almost no time at all. We encountered a group of 20 to 25, mostly women and children. There was a 13-year-old girl. She was unaccompanied, had no family member with her. There was a 15-year-old boy. He was unaccompanied, no family members with her. There was a 16-year-old girl. She was unaccompanied. They all said they were going to see their tios. Tio is Spanish for uncle. Now, when we asked them, does your tio know you're coming? No. No, I just have a number. I'm supposed to call him. It was obvious these tios didn't exist, that these kids were being brought in and were being trafficked. What was most haunting, there was a little girl, a 10-year-old girl, who said she was traveling with her father, and her father was a man who was like 35 or 40, who was not her father. He had his arm around her, but it was not a gentle caress. It was almost like a headlock. He was holding her still and forcefully. The little girl was terrified. We asked about her mother. She just looked at the man she was with. What are we supposed to say on this? It was horrifying. You know, during the Trump administration, they would DNA test when a child arrived with an adult man and they claimed to be father and child. They'd DNA test them. About 30% of them, it was a lie. About 30% had no biological relationship whatsoever. Joe Biden came in and ended the DNA testing. They don't want to know. And the cartels are literally renting children. Now, you ask, do they care? Are they compassionate? No. I was looking at these kids, and I was physically sick, Mark, because I was looking at teenagers. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I was actually standing there. It was just past midnight. It was the morning of my daughter's 13th birthday, and I was looking at that 13-year-old girl and thinking, my God, you're going to be trapped in sex slavery. And the Border Patrol agents can't do anything about it, because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas don't want them to do anything about it. It's evil. Like the argument that the Democrats are compassionate on immigration is insane. And then when you overlay the war in Israel, the risk of a terror attack today in the United States of America is greater than it has been any day since 9/11. And you mentioned the people that have been apprehended on the terror watch list, and more people were apprehended on the terror watch list than the previous decade combined, just last year. But you know, that's not the number that worries me. The number that worries me is 2 million. We've had 8 million people cross illegally under Joe Biden. 2 million of those are what are called gotaways. So 6 million of them, the majority of them, were like this group we encountered that night. They go, they look for the Border Patrol agents, they turn themselves in. The 2 million gotaways are people that they spot, that they identify. Okay, we see them, but they get away. The gotaways are much more likely to be criminals, to be murderers, to be rapists, to be child molesters, to be gang members, to be MS-13, or to be terrorists. Just a couple of weeks ago, the San Diego office of the Customs and Border Patrol put out a written memo saying, be on guard for Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. Southern border who will pretend not to be from Hamas and Hezbollah. And if you're a terrorist, you're not going to turn yourself into the Border Patrol. You're going to be one of the 2 million gotaways. And, you know, just a week ago, the head of the FBI was testifying in the House, and he said he was concerned about the risk of Hamas carrying out a terror attack here. I got to admit, that scares the hell out of me. Why? Because the FBI, and I talk about it in the book Unwoke, the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI and DOJ have been saying for 3 years, the greatest risk of violence in America is homegrown terrorism and white supremacists. Now, give me a break. Look, Nazis and Klansmen are idiots. They're bigots, they're morons, they're imbeciles. And they're unequivocally evil. But it's not like we're seeing a rising surge of Nazis and Klansmen across the country. This is made up in the fever dreams of the left. And they utterly ignore global jihadists that have declared a mission of murdering Americans. And the fact that the head of the FBI, Chris Wray, who both you and I know, suddenly said to the House, there's a real risk of Hamas carrying out a terror attack here, it made me think, holy cow, what does he know now that we don't know? Because something has changed, because 3 weeks ago he wasn't willing to say that publicly, and now he is. And that has me very worried that they have information that an attack could be imminent.
And on this point, when we come back, the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, doesn't even discuss it.
Nope.
Doesn't even think about it. The Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, says he's concerned about hostages, Americans, except within Afghanistan. We have hundreds of people over there. We don't know what happened to them. That's as a result of his conduct. You never hear about them again. He pays $6 billion. I'm not going to engage in idiot talk about whether that means that Iran gets it or not. Iran wanted it and got it. That's the bottom line. Just weeks before what took place with Hamas. So he increases the price and the motivation for hostages.
Yep.
And now he's blaming Israel needs to back off so he can get him out. No, Hamas wants money. Don't forget, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. This is a big-time book, ladies and gentlemen. I predict it's going to be one of the big books of the year. You ought to grab your copy. This is the first exclusive interview. You can get it on Amazon.com right now and any major bookstore starting on Tuesday. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Fantastic book by Senator Cruz, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And what you do in this book, number one, is you identify it. Yeah. Because most people don't even want to do that. Then you give the background of it. Then you explain how it presents itself today and then what to do about it. So I want to hit you on this. We've been talking about citizens. No more important citizen to a parent is their child.
Yep.
There's a war on children, and there's a war on separating parents from children. That's real Marxism. It's going on in our classrooms, and you're right about this. What's your take?
Well, listen, Marxists always start with the kids. And so I opened the book by telling the story of my father. You know my dad. My father was born in Cuba. He grew up in Cuba. And he fought in the Cuban Revolution. He actually fought alongside Fidel Castro. And he was a 14-year-old boy fighting in the revolution. My dad today refers to the revolution. He said that's what we all were. We were a bunch of 14 and 15-year-old boys who didn't know any better, who were young and passionate and idealistic. And my father ended up being imprisoned, being tortured, and he fled Cuba, and he came to America. And, you know, one of the stories I tell right at the outset is about my grandmother. My grandmother, my abuela, was a 6th grade teacher. And she loved teaching 6th grade. And the communists always start with little children. And my grandmother told me how Castro's soldiers would come into the kindergartens and the 1st grades. And they would tell all the children there, they'd say, close your eyes, pray to God, and ask for candy. And the kids would do that, and they'd open their eyes, and there'd be no candy. And then they'd say, close your eyes and pray to Fidel Castro for candy. And the soldiers would quietly put a piece of candy on every child's desk. Marxists understand that if you destroy every other allegiance, destroy an allegiance to God, destroy an allegiance to family, destroy any allegiance other than to the state, that's how they get power. And the reason the cultural Marxists go after our kids, teaching CRT to our kids, teaching them that America is inherently racist, teaching this transgender radical ideology, using Orwellian terms like gender-affirming care, by which they mean sterilizing and genitally mutilating a child. It is aiming at our kids, and this book explains how that happened, but then critically, what this book is about, what Unwoke is about, is how we fight back and win. And it focuses on what has happened, and it starts in Loudoun County in Virginia, where Loudoun County, you had a little girl who was sexually assaulted by a boy wearing a skirt in a girl's restroom. And the school covered it up because their ideology, they said, this cannot happen. They arrested the father of the girl. The sexual predator they transferred to another school, and that boy in a skirt sexually assaulted another little girl. But that sparked a moment where moms in Virginia got pissed off. And it resulted in 2020, Virginia voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. In 2021, 1 year later, Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, was elected, a good friend of mine. I campaigned with Glenn all over Virginia because the moms were fed up. What is this garbage you're doing to our kids? And you look at school boards all across the country. I get involved in a lot of school board races where parents are saying enough is enough. We want to take the radicals out of our schools. That's an example of the kind of victories that are working over and over and over again. And the answer to fight back on every one of these institutions is to take them back, to get in and throw the lunatics out.
Because, as you also point out, 100 years ago or so, there was this guy named Gramsci, an Italian communist.
Yep.
And he says, Marx got a lot right, but he got some wrong. That the revolution in places like America won't be the bottom-up, the proletariat, which after all is the middle class that fights for America. It'll be the top-down. We need to take over the culture of Marxism. We need to get into all aspects of it. It'll be slower, but it'll be permanent. This is one of the reasons your book is so important, because you're saying he's wrong. It's not permanent. If we open our eyes, we address who the enemy is, and we confront them.
Exactly.
So it's top-down, not the proletariat rising up. And so when we come back, I want to ask you this. Is this what has happened to the United States of America? Sort of this Gramsci, Leninist types of cultural Marxism? We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. We're here with our friend, Senator Ted Cruz. Fantastic book, Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And that's part of the key of the book, how to defeat it. So let's talk about what we were talking about, this guy Gramsci and top-down, not bottom-up, and middle-out, as Biden likes to talk about. We see this all around us right now, don't we?
Well, what the Marxists referred to this as is the long, slow march through institutions.
And you have an entire chapter on that.
That's exactly right, on how they captured them. And so I start with universities. I then go to K through 12. I then have a chapter on journalism, and they've utterly captured the corporate media. I have a chapter on big business. I have a chapter on big tech. I have a chapter on government. I have a chapter on entertainment, Hollywood, movies, TVs, music, video games, sports. I have a chapter on science, which has been utterly politicized. And then the final chapter is on China, which is a nexus that interconnects it all. But let me give you an example. Let's talk about big business for a minute. We've seen, particularly in recent years, how giant corporations have become the economic enforcement arm for the radical left, that they punish their enemies, they enforce obedience, they cancel you, they fire you if you dare disagree from their orthodoxy. And that's one of the salient characteristics of Marxists. They use force. You will obey, or they will use force and make you obey. In the book, I talk a lot about Bud Light and Target, because these are two incredible victories that happened recently. Bud Light, I don't think we've ever seen a company destroy a brand so utterly and completely and unnecessarily. Bud Light used to be the #1 selling beer in America. They then decided in their woke condescension that their customers were a bunch of ignorant rubes, and they really all ought to be transgender instead of good old boys enjoying a beer on a Friday night. And the reaction was instantaneous. Look, we just finished going through the baseball playoffs and World Series, and so I went, the Astros played the Rangers in the ALCS. I went to a bunch of the games. I always used to drink Bud Light at every baseball game. I looked around the stadium. There was literally not a single fan drinking Bud Light. Nobody was. They were still on the shelves. The shelves were just full. And they dropped from the #1 selling beer in America to out of the top 10. They lost tens of billions of dollars. Shortly after that, you had Target. Target set up these giant gay pride displays right in the front of their stores that were aggressively marketing LGBT to little kids. They included bathing suits for little boys, 2- and 3-year-old boys, that were marketed as tuck-friendly, so they could tuck their genitals out of the way and pretend they're little girls. This is what Target is saying, here's what your toddler wants. And you know what happened? What happened is the same thing that happened in Loudoun County, the same thing that flipped Virginia red. Moms got pissed. Why are you trying to tell my 3-year-old boy he should be a girl? I came in here to get a giant box of detergents, not to have you lecture me. And Target lost tens of billions of dollars. Now, Mark, the single best thing about what happened to Target? We now know the conversations between the senior executives as the scandal was unfolding. And the senior executives were saying, we don't want to be Bud Light. That's fantastic. The only way you take corporate America back is you change the cost-benefit analysis. The cost of being woke have to exceed the benefits of being woke. And Bud Light and Target showed the real consequences, and I'll give you one other that is very, very recent. So as you know, I do a podcast every week, Verdict with Ted Cruz. I do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We've been covering Israel and Hamas at great length. I did recently a podcast episode that was Black Lives Matter is Hamas, and I laid out that one of the founders of Black Lives Matter has for years called for the destruction of the state of Israel. And then I went through all the giant corporations that have given millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter, Apple, Amazon, Coca-Cola. And I asked them, okay, do these companies support this anti-Semitic agenda? Do they support the destruction of Israel? So that podcast came out October 18th. The next day, Coca-Cola deleted from their website the reference to the $500,000 they'd given Black Lives Matter. They did it immediately in response to the podcast. If you want to take corporate America back, we've got to make the cost, the downside for the next C-suite thinking of doing this kind of stupidity, that risk has to be greater than the benefit they perceive.
The book is Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. Yes or no? Has Mitt Romney now denounced Black Lives Matter after supporting them?
I certainly haven't seen it. He's denounced every Republican he can find, but I haven't seen him say a word about Black Lives Matter.
I haven't heard a damn thing. Welcome back, America. The book is Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America by Senator Ted Cruz. Fantastic book. You can get it at Amazon.com. Any major bookstore starting Tuesday, fresh off the press. Senator Cruz, you write extensively here about China. China sees Biden. He sees the Democrat Party. They see our media. They see it all. What are they saying?
Well, listen, it is really striking how China is intertwined in all of this cultural Marxist takeover of our institutions. Today's Democrat Party is structurally pro-China. Their major stakeholders, big business, big tech, big universities, big Hollywood, all of them are in bed with China. And so what that means, one of the things I talk about in the chapter on China is, for example, how Hollywood allows China to censor its movies. For example, the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, great movie, story of Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. When they released it in China, they erased references to Freddie Mercury being gay. because the Chinese communists didn't like that. And you're sitting there, wait, these virtue signaling Hollywood types are perfectly happy to say, nope, not gay at all. How do you tell Freddie Mercury's story without including that he was gay? It was pretty darn important. You look at Top Gun 2. The original movie, Maverick had a jacket that had a series of flags on it, including the Taiwanese flag and the Japanese flag. When they came out with Top Gun 2 originally, they took off those flags because they didn't want to piss off the Chinese censors. Now, ultimately, I denounced them on the Senate floor and shamed them into they put them back. I said, are you telling me Maverick is afraid of the Chinese communists? And we can actually fight back against it. One of the things I talk about is legislation that I authored and passed called the Script Act that says if any Hollywood press studio allows China to censor what they're doing, that they can't access U.S. government assets to make their movies. They can't use jets and planes and helicopters and all the equipment that they often use, and DOD is implementing that legislation right now, so we can fight back.
You know, there was a day when American corporations were patriotic. It's very difficult to see that today. Oh, there's a one-off here and there and so forth. And China is one more connection. You talk about the Democrat Party. In the few seconds we have left, they have a connection into the White House, don't they?
A very big connection. And the corruption that has flowed through Hunter Biden and directly to Joe Biden is enormous. Look, the Biden family business was selling favors from daddy. Hunter Biden has no marketable skills. When's the last time you paid millions of dollars to a crackhead? That's not what Hunter is selling. He has a law degree, but he's never practiced law for any reasonable period of time. What he sold was favors from daddy, and he made tens of millions of dollars, as did the entire family. It's fundamentally corrupt.
And the Democrats defend it.
Yep.
And they defend China every step of the way. Brilliant point about how China is interlocked with so many aspects of the Democrat Party. And there's a lot of brilliant points in this book. Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. I strongly encourage you to get your copy. You can get it on Amazon.com. Pre-order it anywhere, any major bookstore, starting Tuesday when it comes out. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Any final thoughts, Senator?
Look, I would say there's reason to be optimistic. There's a reason that the left uses force to try to jam this down our throats. Because their ideas are wildly unpopular. They don't make sense. There are a lot more of us than there are of them. And we're winning big victories. We're winning big victories in school boards. We're winning big victories exposing their lies. We're winning big victories with Bud Light and Target. We are on the offense, and truth is on our side. So this book is all about what your show is all about, what your podcast and my podcast are all about, which is truth and light. That's how we take America back, and I'm convinced we're going to do that.
Really a great book, folks. Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. We barely touch the surface. I go on with you hour after hour after hour, but we can't. Here's the book. I encourage you to get it. It's a pleasure, Senator.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.